So it gives me a lot of pleasure to introduce Abeer Essa, who's in our CENMAC team. She's a speech and language therapist who mainly works in Havering, but she also has a qualification as a dyslexia assessor. So she's running this, it's a really nice combination, I think, the two roles. So yeah, she's going to deliver the session this afternoon. So thank you very much, Abeer, and I'll hand over to you.
Hey. Thanks, Catherine. I'm just going to put it on presentation. Okay, so today's session is about recognizing and supporting children and young people with dyslexia. So I thought we'll start with what is dyslexia. So I have mentioned on here all of the basically what Rose Reed wrote about dyslexia. So that's obviously a big chunk of the dyslexia, but I couldn't actually just summarize it because it really is important to know all of it. So basically, he said that the dyslexia is a learning difficulty that primarily affects the skills involved in accurate and fluent word reading and spelling. And another features of dyslexia are difficulties in phonological awareness, verbal memory, and verbal processing speed. And it's very important to know that it actually occurs across the range of intellectual abilities. And then there are lots of co-occurring difficulties that comes with it. So difficulties with language, motor coordination, mental calculation, personal organization, and so on. And usually a good indication of the severity and persistence of dyslexia difficulties can be gained by examining how the individual responds or has responded to well-founded intervention. Because lots of children or adults as well would have all of these difficulties, but really that's a key about people with dyslexia, how severe their difficulties are and if they are persistent. Now, the British Dyslexia Association added more to focus on in addition to this definition. So they did say that we should also acknowledge visual and auditory processing difficulties. And they did say as well that a combination of abilities and difficulties could actually also affect the learning process. So the dyslexia people, they do have actually strengths that we need to focus on. So such as design, problem solving, creative skills, interactive skills, and oral skills. Now, signs to recognize. Before we go into the signs to recognize, I thought just we need to point some things out. So each person with dyslexia is actually unique, and that dyslexia can only be diagnosed through a diagnostic assessment. And usually they present with what we call a spiky profile. So it's a mix of strong and weak areas. And this is where the children, particularly in schools, they could be very tricky to actually identify as having dyslexia. There's a misconception that it only affects reading and writing. It actually could affect organization, coordination, and memory, and more. Now, people with dyslexia have different abilities and difficulties, and a big clue for dyslexia is actually the disparity between difficulties and strengths. And all children have some of the characteristics to some degree, but then no child will have all the characteristics at the same time as well to be considered dyslexic. Now, despite the difficulties, these students with dyslexia might be actually really able, so orally very able, knowledgeable, artistic, creative, sporty, and so on. Now, as I mentioned, many people will have similar difficulties to dyslexia. However, it is important to investigate if the severity of the behaviors actually persist. Now, I'm just going to go through the common signs. So I thought we'll go through the early years when we look at signs of dyslexia, and then primary years, and then secondary. So for the signs of dyslexia with early years, because it could be that we can identify them as early as they're 4 years old, probably. So they would have difficulties sitting still. They would have difficulties paying attention, maybe delay in speaking. They muddle words, difficulty pronouncing some words, especially the multisyllabic words, difficulty listening to stories, following instructions. Some of them might actually like listening to stories, but they have no interest in books. So they have no interest in letters or words. difficulty separating sounds and blending them, difficulties reciting numbers, days of week, shapes, colors, difficulties reciting the alphabets and memorizing songs as well, difficulty retelling stories or sequence of events. They might have good and bad days with no apparent reason. And family history is key as well. If they have been either of the parents, let's say, or siblings have been diagnosed with dyslexia, but really sometimes you would just suspect a child would have dyslexia, but then the parents or siblings, they would be known to have literacy difficulties, but maybe they never have been diagnosed. Difficulties with rhyming, forgets names of friends, teachers, poor auditory discrimination. Sometimes they substitute some words as well, like lampshade for lamppost, and difficulty spelling or writing their own name. Now, when they move on to primary school age, this is where I thought we'll mention the dyslexia iceberg, because what we usually see with students with dyslexia is that they have literacy problems. But we have maybe no understanding or knowledge of what actually cause these literacy problems, because they usually do have visual processing difficulties, phonological processing, that's a big one as well, memory problems, low self-esteem, stress, and so on. So really, usually, we need to focus on the behaviors first. So when we talk about behaviors, we might have a student in class that's easily distracted, disruptive, withdrawn, excessively tired, maybe the class clown as well, lacks self-confidence and has a poor self-image, seems dreamy, and using avoidance tactics. That's actually a really, really important one as well, because they'll be like looking for books, sharpening pencils, maybe going to the toilet often as well. Now, other skills we should look at when we think about signs of dyslexia in primary age. Again, the bad days and good days with no apparent reason, confusing left and right, poor motor skills, memory difficulties as well. When it comes to processing speed, they could be really slow in responding to instructions or text spoken language, and also they'll be slow in writing, poor concentration, and so on. Now, if we move on, so you're going to see on here, just for the sake of this webinar, I thought I'll just highlight, so basically you're going to see in bold the areas that I will speak about later on, and how we can manage them through strategies and assistive technology as well. So more signs of dyslexia for primary school age. For reading, they miss out words, poor comprehension, hesitant to read aloud, reading seems effortful, and a lot more as well. When it comes to writing, they have usually messy written work, poor handwriting, poor spelling, and a lot more signs as well that we need to look at. For numeracy, they'd have difficulties remembering tables. They would have maybe difficulties in confusing, actually, they confuse symbols as well. Reasoning and time, again, poor personal organization, difficulties remembering birthdays, and so on. Now they move on to secondary. Now, some students, if they're severe, they probably by this age, you would identify them. You would know there is something going on. But some children don't actually. And a lot of the girls get also missed out when it comes to dyslexia, because they can just mask their difficulties. But still, we need to look at the behaviors first. So when it comes to behaviors, you usually hear some like teachers saying they're actually often in the wrong place at the wrong time. They're easily distracted, disorganized, and forgetful, and excessively tired. So again, for numeracy, they would be slow at solving problems, misread questions. When it comes to other skills, it could be, again, memory difficulties, slow processing speed. And then when we move on to looking at reading, so again, they don't like to read aloud. They omit, repeat, or add words. They are slow at reading. They lose place when reading, and they have difficulties using dictionaries. So that's also a very important point when it comes to secondary age, and obviously a lot more signs as well. For writing, so problems taking notes, difficulty with punctuation and grammar, difficulty sequencing events in writing, and they also produce messy work and badly formed letters. And spelling continue basically to experience, they continue to experience serious spelling difficulties. Okay, so I thought, since I've got the background of, being a speech therapist and dyslexia assessor, to mention the importance of language as well, because there have been a lot of research about the link between speech and language difficulties in early years, and then later on, these children having literacy difficulties. So really, it is very important to identify the speech and language difficulties as early as possible, because it is vital to find out their difficulties before they go to school, and maybe perhaps even to provide some early intervention support in reading development as well, because this does make a huge difference. Now, in your schools, if you're based in schools, or if you're a parent as well, if a child is in nursery or preschool exhibiting speech and language difficulties, you could always speak to the GP or health visitor, or if in school, you could speak to the SENCO. Now, I would always advise, if you have family history and you suspect your child to have dyslexia, to really raise it, especially in schools, to the SENCOs. Now, bear in mind that diagnostic assessments cannot be done before the age of 7. So some children might exhibit some behaviors from the age of 4, but yeah, they cannot be diagnosed before the age of 7 due to the standardized assessments. Now, strategies to support pupils with dyslexia. There are lots of strategies out there to support dyslexics, but again, because we work in an assistive technology service, I thought I'll focus on the assistive technology in this webinar. But I have mentioned some strategies on here that you could look at in your own time. So strategies as in like general strategies maybe in the classroom, and then strategies to support reading, spelling, visual processing, writing, memory, and behavior. But I thought to actually mention 3 of them that could be really nice to use, and they would make a huge difference as well. So again, the children don't have to be diagnosed with dyslexia. Maybe if you suspect a child you work with, or if you're a parent as well at home and you suspect there is something going on, you could always just use these strategies, because it will work with any child with literacy difficulties and even language difficulties as well. So for reading, there's this approach, which is called the look, cover, say, write, and check. It's actually usually used for spelling. So you would ask a child to look at the word and then cover it and then say it and then write it down and then check their work. But then it's actually really useful for reading sight words. And when it comes to reading for dyslexics, it's really difficult for them. So it's nice for them maybe to start by at least memorizing some of the sight words, just to kind of like boost their confidence and learn these words until they actually learn how to blend sounds and start reading without support. Another example for spelling is maybe spelling words in a form. And you would be surprised to see that actually I worked with children who would be in year 6, and they love to do it. So it's not like babyish for them, because for them, again, it's the sensory input, and it's the fact that they end up knowing that there's another way of actually learning, not only sitting at my desk and looking at the teacher. Writing, there's a really nice approach for supporting writing with dyslexics, and it's called the hamburger paragraph. So basically, you would teach the students that you've got first the topic sentence, which goes on top. And then this sentence usually tells the reader the main idea. And then you've got the bits in between, or what they usually call actually the juicy details. So to support the sentence writing. So it could be maybe 3 different supporting sentences. And then at the end, you would look at the conclusion, and the sentence that refers to the topic sentence and then sums up the main idea for the whole paragraph. Now, when we want to talk about dyslexia and assistive technology, now there's a matching process that happens when we talk about assistive technology and pupils with learning difficulties and dyslexia in this case. There are many types of technologies out there that are available for pupils with learning difficulties, including dyslexia. At CENMAC, we actually follow the SET framework. It's a very famous framework developed by Dr. Zabala. And basically, it focuses on the student, environment, tasks, and tools. So what we do usually is that we have a meeting with the parents and with teachers, and in some cases, the students as well, if it's appropriate. So we look at the students' strengths, and again, we really need to focus on the strengths because a lot of these children might have the technology as actually a strength to them, and they'll be really excited to use something that has to do with technology rather than writing on paper. So yeah, it's really useful to just look at strengths as well, and weaknesses when it comes to reading, math, writing, communication, and the whole, their learning style and so on. And then we also look at the learning, at the environment of learning. So how is the classroom physically arranged? How is it set up? What materials and equipment is actually used? How is construction given? Is it in small groups? Is this student part of a whole class? And then we look at the tasks for learning. So what is the class expected to be able to do? So which tasks are essential for this student to actually be successful? And then we look at the tools, and this is when we actually match the tools. So we match the equipment and software features to the pupils' very specific needs. And it could be what we call low tech, so it doesn't have battery or power basically. And there's mid-level tech, something like calculator, and high tech like software and laptops. Actually, if I go back in slides just to show you the example of low tech, because people often don't tend to know that. So these are actually examples of low tech. So having this, the look cover say, right, check, as a visual support, that's actually low tech, just to leave maybe on their desk. Okay, so if I go back. Now, dyslexia and assistive technology, again, so these are the areas of difficulties usually that dyslexics have. So we've got the reading and reading comprehension, spelling, writing, maths, organizational skills, memory and planning, and self-esteem and confidence. So I thought to mention a few of the technologies, software or apps for each section, and I chose one or maybe two to actually show you examples of. So for reading and reading comprehension, this assistive technology could actually be used. So something like Immersive Reader, which is now part of the Microsoft 365, and reading pens. There's software called the Clicker, Clicker or Clicker Writer, Grammarly, Nessie. It's a very famous program. It's usually for the younger ages. And then Orcam is a camera, another camera. Claro software. So I just thought to show you an example of the scanning pen. So again, that's for supporting the reading and reading comprehension. Because for students with dyslexia, they, because they struggle with reading, they end up just focusing on the reading so much, the reading technique, that they cannot actually pay attention to the meaning of what they're reading. So having a scanning pen or a reading pen is actually really useful. So just to show you a quick video. Oh, sorry about the ads.
Hi, this is Michelle from Montech, and I'm going to show you the C-Pen reader. This is the box that it comes in. And the C-Pen would be for anybody that's dyslexic or has a hard time understanding directions. Maybe it's easier if it's read aloud. So the way this works is you would hit the power button to turn it on, and then it's just ready to scan. When you push down here, a light comes on so you know it's scanning. So I'm going to scan this sentence here.
Assistive technology and developmental domains.
So it will scan the sentence and then read it aloud to you. I can go through and I can do the next sentence.
So this is just to give you an idea about scanning pen. And now we're going to move on to spelling. So again, the Immersive Reader is actually a really, really good tool that comes with Microsoft 365. So if you have got the Microsoft 365, you've got it for free built in it. We've got the WordQ software, and again, Nessie is really good for spelling. And I thought to share with you a video about the WordQ, which supports spelling. Okay, so that's another example of not only supporting spelling actually, so it also supports like research skills and also understanding of the words that they're using. So it really supports all sorts of skills, but mainly it supports it focuses on spelling. Now, when it comes to writing, again, you've got the immersive reader, which is actually really useful. There's software called Docs Plus, there's Inspiration, Grammarly, Clicker, and Dragon. I will show you an example of the Docs Plus. So that's to support reading when they're messy, writing when they're messy writers, or if they cannot sequence their
Turn
ideas
on the
as well.
predictor for writing and spelling support. While you write, the predictor offers suggestions, keeping writing momentum moving forwards. Just select any words you want to use to add them to the document. Word bars offer a selection of subject-specific vocabulary to use in your writing. Pick and choose the words you want to use in your document. If you make a spelling mistake, right-click it to open the spell check and choose from the suggestions. Docs Plus will read out your sentence when you finish it, so you can easily hear any mistakes.
Unhealthy plants have yellow leaves, which indicate a deficiency.
So again, with the Docs Plus as well, it is supporting writing, but really it is supporting reading as well, reading comprehension, spelling. So all of these softwares would usually support more than one skill. This is why if you decide to go for one, it actually would support lots of different skills. You don't have to have all of these together. And it could be overwhelming anyway for the student to use lots of software. And for math, there are some also lovely software, and I chose to show you an example of the Kiwi, right?
All right, agree with client and start time tracking. Great. So for Q4, I was thinking.
What are you
Sorry about the ads again.
We need.
We take handwriting out of the equation. Kiwi Write Math, the alternative to pencil and paper math you've been looking for. Our mission at Kiwi Write Math is to make math accessible. Designed for students who struggle to handwrite math automatically and legibly, our assistive technology does the writing so the student can concentrate on solving the math. We take handwriting out of the equation. Kiwi Write Math provides an on-screen set of math keys in 4 different levels to give students just what they need without adding extra visual clutter. Drop-down tabs provide access to extra math symbols too. Fonts and displays are designed to be easy for students with dysgraphia or dyslexia to look at. Kiwi Write offers a grid-based layout for whole number math levels to help students line up problems in rows and columns. The higher
Okay, so this is an example. I'm just gonna close these. Okay, of the math. So again, for dyslexics as well, they might not struggle with numbers, but then they struggle with writing on paper. And for secondary age as well, sometimes by the time they reach secondary, because they've got so many difficulties with writing on paper and using paper, they end up actually really hating to use paper, and they actually say that usually. And it really puts them off, and they don't even want to use it, even if it's for maths. And obviously, other than the fact that in math, you've got the written equation as well. So this would, the software and apps would support that. For organizational skills, memory, and planning, there's a lovely software called Inspiration, which I'll show you an example of now. Okay. So that was just an example of mind maps. So basically it helps with the organizational skills, and at the same time, a lot of the students with dyslexia, they have very strong visual memory, and this would really support their understanding, how they memorize their work, how they plan it as well. And I thought actually to add also calendars. So calendars can be really useful for memory and organizational skills and planning. And obviously we all have calendars now on our phones, on our computers. So that's really something to encourage students to use. And then when it comes to self-esteem and confidence, again, you've got all of these lovely resources that I have mentioned in previously as well. But then there's also Scribe Easy. Now, Scribe Easy is a lovely software that's about expressive writing. So really it would go under writing and spelling and reading as well. But then I thought to put it in this section because usually with, what happens when children start being able to express their writing, it really boosts their confidence. And this is why I chose to actually put it under this section. So here we go to show an example of Scribe Easy.
Step into Wix Studio, the new web creation platform built for
their own title. When writing with Scribe Easy, there is a thesaurus at the top, and look for words that will pop up at the very bottom of the screen as you write. To the left there is a word bar, and you can scroll up and down as you add words from the thesaurus. This will add words to your word bank. After you write, save chapter, and this will activate the Spellings and Emotions tool. The playback will help you listen to where you need to edit your story.
The mannequin escaped from the shop in the nick of time.
Yeah, so that's another lovely tool as well. And I just wanted to mention the Immersive Reader by Microsoft. So as I said, if you do have Microsoft 365, then you've got it built in already for free, so it could be used. They have really lovely features. So something like Pictionary, so that this helps the students actually right-click on the word, and then it shows them pictures of it, so just to understand what the word means. And then they have other features like changing the background color, because for dyslexic students, they have issues with background colors usually. And it also has the function of tracking word by word while it's reading back for them. And then another thing is actually identifying the verbs, nouns, adjectives, and adverbs. And it also it divides the words into syllables, because usually with dyslexics, they learn in chunks. So this really helps. And then you could also add a function for tracking a whole line. And it also has got the reading coach within it. So on here, you could have a paragraph to read, and you could ask basically the reading coach to start recording. And then after you record yourself reading, you could just see how accurate you were, how long it took you, how many mistakes you made, and so on. So it really is supportive, and it could be done independently while you're in your own room, rather than being in front of a whole classroom in school. I thought just to add this as well, which is by Cole Scotland. So this wheel is lovely. It's got the sections of difficulties usually with learners with dyslexia or literacy difficulties. And yeah, it's got lots of software and apps that you could look at. And another two things we thought to add on here are the Calibre Audio and the R&B. Basically, these are free audiobooks that could be really useful as well. And within CENMAC, as today, we've got Thursday 30 webinars, and a lot of them usually cover also some of these assistive technologies that could be useful to have a look at if you're interested. For exam access arrangements, I thought to add it on here, but this would take another maybe 2 days to talk about it. But then my colleague within CENMAC, actually at the beginning of this academic year, she did actually go through thinking ahead around the exam access. So this is really useful to have a look at as well. And the next steps would be, if you are suspecting a child has got dyslexia, obviously they might already been receiving some support, but then again, to formally identify and diagnose children, they have to go through a diagnostic assessment. And these are usually the 3 websites where you could find some support or find assessors as well. So there's a British Dyslexia Association, the Dyslexia Guild, and PATOS. Thank you. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to contact me. And we're happy to conduct a longer webinar, because I know it's a lot of information to actually just do it in half an hour. Yeah, and I'm not sure if we've got any time for questions.
Oh, thank you so much, Abeer. I know it was so much to get into half an hour, so
Yeah.
you did a great job to cover what you did cover. If anyone has any questions, they could unmute or perhaps pop it in the chat. Or I think Abeer put her email there, so you can contact her. Did anyone want to ask anything? No, you're just getting lots of thank you messages in the chat. So I think, oh, can you show us the slide with the table of tips for teachers?
Do you mean now, or because I have left it on there? So if you access the recording later, you'll have all of this information on it.
Yeah, and I think we can post the slides as well.
Yeah.
If that's okay,
quickly
Hannah. That's where is the recording? They go on up on our website. So under the training tab, you'll see there's a post. Oh, Annabelle's just posted it for you. So you'll be able to access it there. Yeah. Lovely. Oh, well, thank you very much, Abeer. And thanks everyone else for joining us. And hope to see you again.
Thank you, everyone.